A guy that comes in seconds before closing? Yeah, that might warrant a little pro-revenge. We'll get into that story in just a bit, but first, getting revenge on my crappy manager. I worked at this after-school care place. It was always held at the back of the elementary schools in my area, and I would change sites pretty regularly. A lot of high schoolers worked there, including me at the time, and I quite frankly loved that job. Although I did absolutely love my job, I hated my manager. He was a higher up within the company that would stop by and oversee to make sure everything was going smoothly. He was more important than a manager, but that's what I'm going to refer to him as from now on. He was horrible at his job, and everyone I worked with agreed. For example, there was plenty of times someone should have been fired, and he was too chicken to do it, like a coworker who had shown up drunk to work, one that harassed me and multiple other women we worked with who was reported by multiple of us, and one that would literally disappear for hours during her work hours. The real problem, however, came very shortly before he fired me. Didn't know he knew how to do that because I missed my shift. I had just left school, and as I was getting into the car, I accidentally closed the door on my fingers, like the middle of my fingers, and it was so hard I broke two of them and had to rush to the hospital. On the way, I shot him a quick text that my friend sent who drove me, because I was crying too hard to call him. Now, in the contract I signed when I got the job, a no-call, no-show resulted in being fired, unless it was a medical emergency. So, after I came back to work with one of those splints on two of my broken fingers, he came to the site I was at with a write-up that I had to sign. I asked him why, because I told him before my shift had even started. He looked at me and said, quote, "I called you saying you still had to come in and you didn't answer. But I had no service in the ER, so I never got it." I told him there's no way he expected me to come in with two broken fingers, and he told me it wasn't his problem. So he fired me, but told me I was still expected to show up to my two final shifts of the week, which he had done 20 minutes before first shift, and I was so in shock I went. On my second, a different higher-up stopped by that I had never met just to check in. She came over and introduced herself, holding out her hand. When I told her my name, she retracted her hand and walked away without another word. After my shift, a coworker called me and let me know that my manager had called every single coworker of mine and told them if I showed up again to call the police because I wasn't supposed to be there for my last two shifts. I was in shock. He had told me to go to them. There was even an HR person sitting in our meeting that could confirm this, so I went to HR. I had a meeting with the head of the department and the woman who was there when I got fired. I told them about the coworker who had harassed me, the write-up that didn't make sense, and the HR person confirmed he had told me to show up for my shifts. And you're probably wondering where I got my revenge? He got fired because of me. They went to other of my coworkers who confirmed my story and they fired him. I learned this a few months after the whole debacle when talking to a school friend of mine. Her mom works in the school district and confirmed to me that he had been fired because of me. To this day, whenever I remember it, I smile. Do I feel sort of bad? Yes. But when I tell you my story doesn't even include the half of what this manager did and didn't do, you'd understand why I feel so happy. Although this may not be deemed as petty, I think it is because I had an attitude of if I'm going down, he's coming down with me. And that's the only reason I went to HR. Yeah, this guy just doesn't seem like a very good person. Like, you're willing to overlook sexual harassment in the workplace, people showing up drunk, but this girl breaks her fingers, goes to the ER, notifies you, and you fire her because of that, and then you lie by trying to get her to continue to work and then saying that you didn't do that and she's trespassing if she shows up. What an absolutely awful person. So yeah, this isn't necessarily petty revenge, but her actions directly got him to lose his job, so I'm here for it. Good job. Ranos131 commented, "So let me get this straight. Manager does illegal things and no one, including you, went to HR. Manager illegally fires you in front of an HR rep whose job it is to make sure those sorts of things don't happen. Manager tells you to work your last two shifts, also in front of HR, despite the fact that this goes against company policies, and again, HR rep does nothing. A different manager, who doesn't work at your site, gives you the cold shoulder because the other manager told everyone to call the cops, but she doesn't call the cops or tell you to leave. Did I get all that correct?" Traditional Noise 199 responded, "Sort of, yes. To HR, the write-up was reasonable because they were unaware I had been in the ER. However, they said to call the cops after I had left for the day, so I'm still not sure what happened there, but whatever." Also, hi, my name is Brendan, and if you guys enjoy these petty revenge videos, it would be so awesome if you left a like or commented down below if you're listening to our podcast. That being said, our next story is Petty Revenge on Shopper Asshats by Being Kind. I'm not sure if this qualifies as petty revenge, but I do know it helped a little girl forget about other people's cruelty for a little while. Some years ago, I was shopping in a Target and noticed a little girl and her mom receiving all sorts of unwarranted negative attention from other shoppers. People were staring, pointing, gasping, and even snickering, talking loudly about the girl between themselves, etc. The girl had to have been around 4 years old and suffered from some sort of congenital disfigurement to her face and head. Like, half of it was kind of dented in. It was bad and kind of shocking, but Jesus, she's just a little girl. Be better, people. It was obvious that for the girl and her mom, this kind of rude attention was nothing new. The little girl wouldn't look at anyone, but kept her head down and just looked at the merchandise within reach or occasionally at her mom. The mom had no problem defiantly looking anyone in the eye, shoulders squared. You could tell she had no problem standing up to a-holes like these shoppers. And you could tell, too, that they didn't have much money. So anyway, I took all this in while shopping, never directly staring, mostly watching it all out of the corner of my eye, and I felt such a strong need to counter all this BS and to do what I can to try and help this little girl feel like every other 4-year-old living her best life, at least for a moment. I ditched my cart, ran to the front of the store, and stood in a painfully slow line to buy a $50 gift card, all the while hoping they didn't leave before I located them again. With the gift card in hand, I lucked out and found them in the little girl's clothing section, still suffering other people's rudeness as they tried to shop. I approached the mom, and when I said, "Excuse me," she looked like she was going to clock me, expecting me to say something rude or mean. I tried to show nothing but kindness in my eyes and smiled and said, "I've had this gift card bouncing around in my purse, and I always forget to use it. Would it be okay if I gave it to your daughter?" The mom was shocked to receive kindness for once, smiled and said, "Sure." Smiling, I knelt next to the little girl, and while giving her the card said, "Pretty girls deserve to buy pretty things," in my best loving mom voice. She shyly took the card from my hand, then turned and raced to her mom to excitedly show her. As I turned to walk away, the mom calls out, "Thank you," and I just waved my hand and said, "You ladies go have fun," and smiled and finished up my shopping, giving every rude jerk in the store the stink eye on my way out. They say the best revenge is a life well lived, and if only for a little while, I'm glad I was able to help that sweet girl live her best life. This is such a wholesome story. The world really needs more people like OP here that just lift people up. Random acts of kindness. I'm sure that absolutely made the daughter and the mom's day, and yeah, hopefully they had fun with that $50. Good job, OP. Arachnid Guilty 218 commented, "As the step-parent of a special needs child, I can tell you that you have to be the world's largest advocate for them wherever you go. When shopping, I noticed 3 types of behavior. By far, the most common thing is that you can see people look, and then look away quickly. They will likely not enter the aisle you're in. They're uncomfortable, and that's okay. The rarest type are people who go out of their way to be friendly. It's very uplifting since you're locked into a defensive mode, meaning you're vigilantly scanning for situations or objects that can harm your child. Oh, and the third group, they're 2-tiered. The majority give dirty looks, signaling you shouldn't be there. Some give a distasteful or loud sigh as they pass by. These folks got the stink eye from me. The worst of the worst are the ones who point and stare, say derogatory things to your face, or worse, say something to a friend loud enough you can overhear them. These people will ask to be seated elsewhere if you're in a restaurant. My favorite trick to do if someone changed tables was to immediately go to the cashier, pay their bill, and have it signed as from the little girl you wouldn't sit near. Our next story is, worst guy in the barracks got assigned to my room. He made me miserable, so I returned the favor. This happened almost 22 years ago now. I had joined the Army and was in my second phase of training for my job, what's known as AI. It's where you go after basic training, and is a lot more laid back, but there are still drill sergeants there. They're far more chill than the ones at basic. Anyway, there's a system of gaining more privileges, and because I couldn't take a P-test while my injured legs were recovering, I was stuck at an early phase for too long. I was in a room with another Phase 4 Ranger, and we got along great. Then a brand new kid, straight out of basic, got assigned to our room with us. We were way farther along in our training, so our schedules didn't match up with this new guy. The guy was the biggest, dumbest, ugliest, laziest jerk imaginable, and he thought he was the smartest person in any room. Every night at lights out, he'd listen to 50 Cent on his headphones whacked up so loud that I couldn't hear my own music on my own headphones. Every single morning when he had early duty, he'd never get up and a drill sergeant would beat our door down to go fetch him. He made unbelievable messes in the room, and every single day we'd get in trouble because while my roomie and I were in class, this jerk would come in from whatever casual duty he was on and freak everything up. Then there'd be extra duty for us every weekend for failing room inspections. I don't know how, but this jerk got boot polish on the freaking bathroom mirror. He'd snatch up our crap and put it in his wall locker out of pure carelessness and insist that there's no possible way he had it. The one and only time he helped clean the room was when he emptied the garbage can. Once. And he acted like he'd just built the pyramids for us of pure benevolence the way he went on about how helpful he'd been. And when he wasn't doing all this, he was picking arguments about what a genius he was. So, we despised him. We'd ask for him to be moved, but the drills would never do it. We wanted to unalive the guy. In fact, I still kinda do. Every single day, we'd both tell him what a consummate piece of crap he was. Eventually, he came off casual status and got into class. One of the early parts of that class was land navigation for some reason, and land nav day meant being out there early. That presented me with an opportunity I'd been waiting for. One of those days when he left a giant mess, he also left his wall locker unsecured. So I looked inside to see if there was anything of note, and there it was. The combination to the padlock he used on his wall locker. And the best part is that everyone used the same model and color of crappy master lock padlock from the PX across the street since it was the only thing available. So I went ahead and swapped my lock out with his and left for training. When I got back, he was already back and had been for a couple hours, since it was an early day with an early release for him. This was Arizona in July, and he'd been scrambling all over the land navigation course in the sun. Got back to the barracks to get a shower and change, and he was locked out of his crap. Oh boy, he was distraught. Just absolutely at the end of his rope over it. I pretended to be helpful and tried to get it open, but to no avail. So I told him he was gonna have to get a drill sergeant to come cut the lock off. So he went to do that, and while he did, I switched his lock back and kicked back on my bed. When he came in with the drill sergeant, he'd been crying. Everyone who was in the vicinity got to watch him totally break down, sobbing, I was told. I was sitting on my bed looking suspiciously innocent, and the drill sergeant in question gave me this smirk. She was no dummy, and she knew I had to be behind it. So she said, "Okay, before I cut your lock off, I'm gonna try the combo just to be sure. What is it?" And he told her, and she opened the lock straight away. My roomie and I couldn't contain our glee. His head just dropped and he cried some more. He couldn't believe it. He felt so totally defeated and humiliated and worthless right then. This guy was such a high-strung, narcissistic jerk that this little prank totally crushed him. It was glorious. They moved him out the next day into someone else's room, and that guy, he wanted to murder this idiot as soon as he was moved in. I felt bad for him, but that absolute jerk was out of my hair, and I got to see him cry in the bargain. I never told him that I pranked him. I told some others. They really enjoyed knowing that, since they all hated his guts too. Within a couple of weeks, I graduated and went on to my next station. This dingleberry didn't follow. He actually was supposed to follow, but needs of the army screwed him out of the super specialized follow-on training. So he got sent straight into the meat grinder. I never saw him again though, and that's all that matters. I still take more satisfaction in this than even I can believe. Sometimes you get a chance to get your revenge, and if you do it, it's better than you thought it ever could be. Edited to add. I had my wife and kid living off post, and getting duty on the weekends every week seriously cut into the time I was able to spend with my family. I reamed him over this. He didn't give a freak. Did I say that I loathed him? I freaking loathed him. When I say I wanted to unalive him, I'm not exaggerating. He got me extra duty on my son's first birthday. I appealed to a drill, and she cut me slack because she knew it wasn't my fault. But yeah, this dude, absolute crap bag. So first of all, just glad that you didn't actually unalive the guy. I think public humiliation is a much more apropos way to get back at him for treating people the way that he did. So yeah, this is a good little revenge story, I guess you could say. The Walden Puddle commented, "Serious question. I know this is the army and all that, but is there no recourse at all? Even for someone who's clearly so immature and deluded that they're a danger to themselves and everyone else? There's no method to have a private but serious conversation with a superior and lay this stuff on the table and ask them to just kind of have a look at this guy and whip him into shape, teach him some much-needed lessons? Or do they expect the enlisted to just kind of figure it out or weed them out on their own? Curious to hear what the expectations are as well as the reality. How's it supposed to work, and how does it actually work? Snarflebarf replied to this, well, the expectation in training is to square your buddy away. So in basic, for example, you might get yelled at because the guy next to you in formation has a jacked up uniform or something. Here, it was everyone's responsibility for the room, so if it was freaked up during the inspection, we're all guilty. And the senior drill hated both my roommate and I, so we were pretty sure that he was responsible for keeping him in there to make us miserable. When I left, I threw one of my son's crappy diapers in the trash can under his desk. More petty revenge. He replaced a really cool senior drill that I liked who liked me too. By the time you're in the big boy army, it's way more relaxed, or at least it was in my unit. I also lived off post because I was married, and everyone in the barracks had their own room, so this kind of thing was a non-issue. Our next story is, van drivers keep blocking the pavement, making it dangerous for pedestrians, gets in trouble with his boss and police. In the UK, it's currently not illegal to park on pavements other than a few locations. Where I'm based is one of the few places you get fined. For a few weeks, there were vans constantly blocking the pavement on a school-run route, with the vans on the only pavement available and blocking the view. Cars often fly down and around the corner as it's a rat route to sneak in front of a load of traffic if you know about it, so it's pretty dangerous if you're a pedestrian if the walkway is blocked. It started with maybe just one van, but you could still squeeze past. Not good if you have any mobility issues or aids or any pushchairs. Being a school-run route, obviously there's pushchair traffic and young kids on bikes and scooters. Obviously though, it was starting to get two vans with at least one blocking the pavement. I take photos to try and report it, but two kids and job with a different walk home for various reasons meant that I kept forgetting. This isn't going to be going away anytime soon, as they've parked a trailer on the grass verge for the tools and things. Cue to the final straw. Two vans with one completely parked across the pavement and another one parked completely across the pavement and over the bumpy, for those with visual impairments, dropped curb. It's right in front of the trailer and with a company name on the side for once. I had to take my young kids into the middle of the road to get safely to the next just as we had crossed a car covered flying around the corner and down the road. Glad we had been 10 seconds earlier. Let's just say I tell my kids just that because of the dangerous parking. I immediately take a photo as normal, and just as I do, a guy comes out of a trailer and works out that I'm taking a photo and starts shouting at me. I'm guessing he heard me mention the parking and twigged me, then taking a photo was not a good thing for him. The cars get by! It's not safe for anyone else though. But cars can! You can't take a photo of me! I can call the... Don't worry, I'm contacting the authorities about your dangerous parking, and walked off taking my kids to school. Guy had a work top on. Turns out was in the edge of the photo. Van had logo and website on the side, and my photo caught all of this and how bad his parking was. I contacted the highways team with all the photos, local counselor and his company. His company is a big company, so I immediately got one of the meeting automatically sent emails about how awesome the company was. Replied going, hey marketing, sorry I'm about to mess up your unsubscribe stats and things. Also, heads up, this happened and I know marketing teams, being from one, that we can make things happen fast when things go sideways. This went down this morning with one of your employees at X location. I sent it to the following people and will do what I need to ensure that the route goes back to being safe again after this morning. If you can work your magic, here's a photo of the guy and the van. Less than 10 minutes later, I get a message going, we're on it, thanks for the heads up. Leave this with us, it won't happen again. Police get back to me a week later. It was a non-urgent issue and it was reported to the highways people who referred it on, and said they were following up on it too. They've not been parking on that pavement at all, and all the kids get safely to the primary schools and to secondary schools this is a key route for. He thought he could shout and intimidate a short. I'm tiny, but instead got him and all his coworkers in trouble with their company and the police. Edit. Apparently, some people are confused about what a pavement is. Cars aren't supposed to be driving or parking on them. Basically think sidewalk if you're from the US. Yeah, you know, their reaction pretty much indicates they knew they were doing wrong right from the get-go, and then all of a sudden you get defensive when you discover that you've been found out and could potentially get busted for this, so Glad it got shut down. Those rules and regulations are in place for a reason, and now hopefully pedestrians are a lot safer in the area. Oztrail Runner commented, "Good. I reported a woman who lived right outside a school who would park her 4x4 across the footpath. This would force primary school kids, mums with prams, and one kid in a wheelchair onto the road, directly in front of school buses. This happened almost every day. The reason the 4x4 was parked across the footpath was their enormous caravan taking up their driveway. I took a photo of kids walking on the road, a bus directly behind them, and the 4x4 blocking the only footpath. I'm not sure what the action taken was, but they must have put their caravan in storage as it was gone 2 weeks later, and the 4x4 was always parked hard up against the garage, which was totally full of crap and boxes." Our next story is, "Got cut off at the security checkpoint. I got petty and skipped her carry-ons. A quick petty revenge. I was going through security checkpoint and the line was getting long, and we had to bend around the corner so that we don't block foot traffic. Then this old woman decided she was too good to walk around the corner and queue from the back, and just decided to cut right in front of me as I was passing the corner. I tried telling her the line was at the back nicely, but she literally just dropped her carry-on and walked in front of the line to get to the security body check. She was probably thinking we would just push her bags along. She technically didn't just cut in front of me, she was cutting in front of everyone while expecting us chums to push her bag through. I did initially push her bag for a while, but decided freak that and skipped her bags. The woman behind me saw what I did and she too skipped her bags. When I got through the security check, I saw her anxiously looking around for her bag. She then approached me asking, "Where's her bag?" I just simply told her she got the wrong person and walked away. Edit. Just to clarify a few things, my initial post was vague about. She left her bag in the plastic basket and left it on the metal roller where the rest of us would slowly push our bags into the scanner. We haven't reached the conveyor belt yet, so we still have to manually push the bag/basket towards the conveyor belt. Yeah, so she just cut in front of me with the basket, left it at the metal rollers and left. I spoke up, but she turned around and didn't care and just left. Yeah, so I don't care how old you are, when you have this kind of a pretentious attitude, you're just asking for something like this to happen. Honestly, be grateful that's all they did. If you were in LA, somebody probably would have physically harmed this old lady, so yeah, that's tough. Pomegranate Pants 99 commented, "My husband has a similar situation recently. Some guy just put his own phone on top of my husband's backpack at the Las Vegas airport. There are no trays at this airport. You just send your stuff loose on the belt. There was zero reason this guy needed to put his phone on my husband's backpack like that. It was weird, so the bag comes out, my husband grabs the handle of the backpack and puts it on like nothing ever happened. Phone goes flying under the conveyor belt and the guy called him a Richard." Our next story is, "Guy comes in seconds before closing, gets turned away. I work at an urgent care who take patients up until closing, which is 10 p.m. So as I'm locking the door last night, a guy and his 3 kids yank it open as I have my hand on the lock. So I sit back down to register this final group of people, and he finds a friend of his in the lobby. Of course, the first thing he does is walk over to have a conversation, not even starting the registration process. So I take a look at the clock, 10:01, and he's not moving. So I shut off my computer and shut the lights off, which gets his attention. He walks over and in the most snarky voice possible says, "Me and my 3 kids need to be seen." My response, "Unfortunately, we only take patients till 10 p.m. and that time frame has passed." He responds saying he was in the building before 10 p.m. Unfortunately, not as a patient, but as a companion to the people he was talking to in the lobby. So I offer to walk them out so I can lock the door behind them. I was out at 10:05 p.m. and happy as a clam. Okay, so anyone that has ever worked customer service where you're responsible for shutting a building down, I think can relate to this. People that come in like 1 to 2 minutes before closing, and they absolutely know what they're doing when closing is, it's so annoying. I mean, that's not to say that you don't honestly get people that don't know any better and they come in, they just need to buy something, need something really quick. That's fine, but like the people that are like, they close at 10 and it's 9:58? Yeah, let's just go on in there anyway. Oh, so annoying. Also, this is urgent care, so why are you dragging your feet going into urgent care if you need to be urgently cared for? Just a thought there. Catless Boy Mom commented, "You and your 3 kids need to be seen, but you decide to wait until 10 p.m. to show up, and then you decide it's cool to have a chat with someone in the lobby before checking in? If it was just one of the kids, I could have told myself the poor kid can't help having a crappy dad. Since it's him and the kids, it's obviously not that urgent to him. I would have done the exact same thing." Our next story is, oh, you're a senior to me and there's nothing I can do about it? Over 30 years ago, when I was in the Navy, I went to my initial job skill schooling that the Navy calls A School. So all through A School, I was one of the most junior people. One day, I was speaking with someone, and another recruit, who's one pay grade above me, told me to shut my mouth or he was going to write me up. At that time, I had no idea what he could do, so I was just quiet. He told me there was nothing I could do because he outranked me, and if I knew better, I would just shut my mouth. Well, I was a bit of a pistol back then, so I was going to get my revenge one way or another. The day before we graduated and left the base, we received our tickets to fly to our home of record and then our next duty stations. So I purchased a roll of duct tape and a bottle of rubber cement. When he packed his duffel bag, he put it in his locker and put the lock on the locker. I came along in the middle of the night and pulling duct tape out would take one loop of duct tape and then smear rubber cement on it. Then I would take another strip of duct tape wrapped around his lock and then smear rubber cement on it. And I did that until the lock was one big gray ball on his locker door. Unfortunately for him, his tickets were in there. Boo-hoo. I had my tickets and I saw him and one of the seniors enlisted trying to cut their way through the tape and cement. I heard as I was about to leave that there was no chance he was going to make his flight. Once again, love it. He may outrank you, and anyone that works a job where you have a supervisor or a boss or whatever, they may outrank you, but that doesn't make their lives any more important than you. Like, we're all people, so get him back, put cement on his locker. Love it. Our next story is, pay for your child. I come from a family with divorced parents. My mother would often take my father or my half-brother's father to court to ensure she got as much money as she could out of them. My half-brother works in trades, so I was also doing side jobs for cash, i.e. cash unreported and not paying taxes. While we get along, he had wronged me many ways, which I won't bother getting into, but he'd also brag about how much he makes doing side jobs and what he'd buy. He ended up knocking up a woman he had met on Tinder and then completely tried to ghost her. He deleted his Facebook account, etc. She lawyered up and someone tracked him down to serve him papers. When he was served, he was working for one company and making a certain amount, so when he was served papers and went through the courts, was ordered to pay a certain amount of child support. He then switched employers and was making significantly more and should have then been paying more child support. At this point, he and my mother were bragging about him not having to pay as much as he should. Any extracurricular activities I did were paid for through child support or by my dad during visitation, and my half-brother wasn't doing anything except for watching the child during his now required visitation. So I created a fake Facebook account and informed the mother of the child of his new employment/higher pay, so that he'd be paying the requisite amount of child support, and hopefully that'd translate to the mother providing additional support and activities for my nephew. Once again, love this. You can run, but you can't hide. Don't be a deadbeat dad. Just pay the child support. Want to be a part of your child's life. I mean, come on now. D. Kelly 256 commented, kind of wild your mom would brag about something like that considering her experiences when you were a child. Our next story is, bad neighbor. We have a neighbor. It's an older lady, 65 to 70, and she lives alone. Everybody knows her because she's not very kind, yelling at the neighborhood kids and don't say hi when you see her. Last year, my boys, 4 and 7 years old, were throwing bang snaps at the ground and she ran outside and started yelling at them, "Get the heck out of here." My wife was there and can't react out of astonishment. That night, we sent her a Christmas card. It was in late December. A nice card with some drawings and some kind words. My oldest brought it to her and she opened the door. At first, she was suspicious, but then she said, maybe we should be a bit more kind to each other. The next day, we received a card and some Christmas chocolate. Revenge is sweet. Okay, so horrible diction aside, I think the moral of the story is that in being kind to someone that's mean, you can help them turn over a new leaf and then they become kind. I don't know what we just read, to be honest with you. Our next story is, happy anniversary, MFer. I hope y'all enjoy this, because after 10 years, I can finally find humor in it. My 32-year-old male, ex 32-year-old female, went and married my roommate, 39-year-old male, only they didn't tell me, for almost 2 weeks. The really messed up thing was we were still sleeping together, including the night the two of them had been married. I ended up blocking and unfriending the mutual friends I had with both of them, except one. I'll call her Len. Len and I were friends long before we knew either ex or roommate. She also cut ties with them not long after. Several months after the breakup, Len starts drunkenly texting me. She's pleading for forgiveness cause before the two idiots got married, X told Lynn what was up with X and roommate, but swore Lynn to secrecy. By this point, I wasn't angry enough to be mad at Lynn, especially because she was spilling the tea in the form of screen caps of their convos. One of them was solid gold, like full-on nuclear craptastic gold. Side note, I don't have these anymore. The iPhone it was on got nicked, and I switched to Android shortly thereafter. In the texting between her and X told Lynn that I was not only better in bed, but also more well-endowed. I saved the screen caps and waited until their anniversary. On that day, I unblocked roommate, sent him the screen caps, wished him a happy anniversary, and left him on unread. There's no revenge story quite like casually removing the pin from the grenade, dropping it, and then walking out of there and, listening to the explosion behind you, right? Hiker2190 commented, I would have also told roommate how you slept with X on their wedding day. Not that he would have believed you, but you would have planted a seed in his brain that maybe he effed up marrying such a skank tramp. Our next story is, my roommate threw food in my trash can in the midst of an ant infestation, so I'm directing them towards him. I live in a really cramped dorm room, one that can't even fit 2 people comfortably, let alone 3. For the last few months or so, people in our building have been complaining about a serious ant problem, but we were spared last semester. Yesterday, I woke up and noticed there were about 5 or so ants on my wall by my plug. Well, that sucks. Anyway, I leave the room and start my day. I had no classes, so I just went to get something to eat, and then I did my radio show. Once I get back to my room, I see a brown bag in my trash can. I take a closer look and see that it contains the wrapper to a burger, a few french fries, and a mostly empty soda. And of course, I also see that the bag is infested with ants. I take a look at the spot on the wall from that morning, and there's more like 30 ants. I immediately throw that bag outside into the dumpster, but I felt kinda ticked off that I had to clean up my roommate's mess that he threw in my trash can, and I'm also suffering the consequences. So since then, every time I see an ant on my desk, I just flick it in the direction of his area. His bed is in clear eye shot of my desk, so I can easily direct them that way. I'm not sure if it's doing anything. I don't believe ants take fall damage, but they could just be dying or coming back my direction. But I'm going to continue to throw the ants in that direction. Honestly, that is a very good question that I don't know the answer to. If someone could please look into that, or if you happen to know, comment below. Do ants take fall damage? Like, if you drop an ant from, the 5th story of a building, what happens when it hits the ground? I'm just kind of curious there. Megan Shadow commented, well, that's useless. Ants follow scent trails. Yeeting them through the air means no ant will go to your roommate's side. If you want them scavenging around her bed, stick a tiny drop of honey every few inches in that direction from the wall socket trail. But honestly, have someone with Prime overnight you Advion gel bait for ants. The stuff is magic and will unalive off the colony, and it won't poison you unless you eat it. Our next story is, petty vengeance is best served loud, with a bucket of popcorn and an empty cup of soda. A few moments ago, I received a memory notification from Facebook of the time I went to see Madam Web in IMAX last year, and I thought to myself, what an awesome story to share on petty revenge, if not just for laughs. Here we go. Throughout all of 2023 and 2024, I avoided opening weekend of films I wanted to see like the plague. After the COVID outbreak and everything started reopening, something clicked in people. I can't properly explain it in any other way other than people decided that it was perfectly fine for them to be a jerk during a movie and ruin the experience for other people. Except for a handful of movies. I paid the $20 at home showing of films I wanted to see to avoid any confrontations in that goddamn Nicole Kidman AMC buffer. For those expectations, I still avoided opening weekend, but I would go see them during the work week. Unfortunately, dang near every film I went to go see was accompanied by a jerk still, and Madam Web was my breaking point. When I purchased the Madam Web ticket, there were only 5 people in the 310-seat auditorium, all of whom were spread apart, and none were on the same row. Perfect. Now, I will admit, I did purchase my seat on the same row as someone else, but we were 10 seats apart, and as it turned out, the other person was an elderly gentleman that I've seen enough times that we had begun getting chummy. A pleasant surprise. What wasn't a pleasant surprise was the couple who came rolling in halfway through the trailers, pulling up on me and saying I was in one of their seats. I whipped my ticket out like a gunslinger from the quick and the dead, and sure enough, I was in my row and my seat. How did I know? Because I'm an adult and therefore can read the ticket, the letter on the floor, and the number on my seat's armrest. When I asked them to check their tickets, I noticed that they bought the seat to my left and the seat to my right, which means this couple went to the ticket counter and when they were asked what seats they wanted, took their finger, pressed on the screen, and selected those seats. And when I confronted them on it, they basically told me that if I didn't like it, I could always move to a different seat. So I got up, left the auditorium, went to the ticket person, and asked them to pull up the seating chart. And sure enough, I was correct. The guy even asked me if my friends found me. And when I told him what was up, his response was, quote, "So these randos bought these seats directly beside you?" I took a picture of the seating chart, which I can't share on here unfortunately, and told the guy that you may receive a call about an unruly moviegoer. He knew what I was about to do, and he told me he'd keep an open ear for it. My partner in crime. The gloves were off. I bought popcorn, a drink, and the loudest effing candy I could buy. Throughout the film, I was that jerk. I sat directly behind them. Thankfully, the film was so ridiculously loud and so ridiculously terrible, I wasn't bothering anyone else in the theater. I kicked their seats, I was throwing popcorn, I was chewing the candy with my mouth open, I was adding commentary, I was sucking on an empty cup for like 45 minutes. I even took a goddamn phone call, and they just sat there and took it. By the end of the film, they were the first ones out of the theater, practically running, and the old guy gave me a thumbs up, and I bought him an overpriced beverage from their bar, and that is the end of the story. So, Reddit, was I petty, or was I P-E-T-T-Y? I do look forward to your comments. I will ask you one question though. If you entered an auditorium and you were one of 6 people in the showing, would you sit directly beside, in front, or behind another moviegoer? What do you consider a common courtesy in this situation? Well, this is obviously intentional on the behalf of the 2 others, and they thought that they could just kind of push you out of your seat, which ultimately they did, but I think that you handled this well in just sitting behind them, kind of going the malicious compliance route, dare we say, and making it an utterly miserable experience for them. They could have chosen many other seats. It sounds like the theater was pretty much empty, but they did it to be jerks, so the old karma is a boomerang once again. Zeismog commented, "I think it was that OP had picked the best seat in the house, and the couple wanted the best seat in the house. So they figured that by being jerks, they could push him out of that seat, and he would go elsewhere in the theater so they could enjoy the best seats by themselves, without him. If that's what they were thinking, then they must not be very good at playing chess, because they only thought one move ahead. OP, on the other hand, thought several moves ahead, and his counter move was, well, if it wasn't brilliant, it was at least diabolical." Our next story is, Turnabout is fair play. In a former life, I worked 24-hour call for an oil field service company. We would be dispatched any time of day or night, and we didn't know how long we might be away when we were called out. Maybe only a few hours, sometimes a couple of days. Any time at home was precious, especially if it meant getting a good night's sleep. Yes, it was a sucky life, but that was compensated by low pay and crappy working conditions. One of my duties as a crew supervisor was to prepare the job invoice. In those days, it was all done by hand. The lady who did the graveyard shift at dispatcher would review all the day's invoices for accuracy and correct any mistakes. If she had any questions or found any mistakes, she would call you at home, in the middle of the night, when you and whichever loved ones you might have had were all peacefully in bed dreaming of a better life. Often, the mistakes were very obvious and didn't need a call to fix, but she'd call anyway, just to let you know that 6 times 9 isn't 42. I told her I didn't mind if she called about a legitimate question, but if it's just an addition or multiplying error, just fix it. There's no need to bother me. She still called with every issue, no matter how insignificant. One day, I decided to get even. I called her at home and asked the simplest, most inane question about an invoice. I called her again 30 minutes later with another stupid question, and again 15 minutes later with another question. Finally, she told me that since she has to work nights, that I was calling when she normally slept. My answer was, now you know what it feels like. After that, she didn't call me at home unless she had a very, very good reason. And sometimes people really do need to taste the medicine before they start dishing it out to other people. So, glad that at least once you started blowing her phone up when she was trying to sleep, she stopped doing it and she understood what you were saying. Hoot Black Desiato commented, "Years ago, I worked dispatch at an oil field casing company, usually the 12-hour overnight graveyard shift. We ran casing crews, drill pipe laydown crews, thread cleaning crews, float equipment, and hot shots out of our shop. All the crews and drivers were on call 24/7. I would not have dreamed of calling any of those individuals, ever, for anything that was a work call-out or an emergency. Our next story is, want a party in the hotel room next to me? Enjoy your wake-up call. A few years ago, I was staying in a hotel room in suburban Detroit. I was a Navy reservist on my drill weekend. On Saturday night, this couple shows up in the adjoining room with a buddy and their probably 6-year-old kid. I think nothing of it until it's about 10 p.m. and 2 more people show up. Now it's a party. They're being obnoxious, so I knock on the door and ask them to keep it down, that I have to work in the morning. We're not even being loud. How can you hear us? Bro, I'm in the room next to you. There's a door between our rooms. I can hear you clearly. Yeah, okay. Door closes. 45 minutes later, they're just as loud as they had been. I call the front desk. I hear the neighbor's phone ring. He hangs up and says, if he thinks we're loud, wait till later. They continue to party and they're obviously being loud on purpose to spite me. Eventually, I got tired enough and fell asleep at about 1 a.m. I wake up at 5:30 to get ready for work. Petty revenge. I plug the alarm clock into the socket near the adjoining door, put the speaker against the door they can't open. I put the radio between stations, crank the volume to max, and set the alarm for 5 minutes after I leave the room. I picture them panicking and furious and not being able to stop it. I would have given anything to see their reaction. Yeah, this is warranted. You know, they don't want to respect quiet hours, so yeah, again, just dish it right back at them. Ramradron commented, my revenge against noisy hotel partiers involved me dialing their room at 5 a.m. from the lobby, hearing a bleary hello, and asking how the party was. Then, again from the airport. Idiot didn't think to take the phone off the hook for his 5 wake-up calls. It's not big brain time commented, 9 years ago, me and 2 friends were drinking in silence and watching Seinfeld after a late-night concert, and our neighbors in the room next to us were partying hard AF. We didn't care because we had likely just come from the same punk show, so it was all good. Anyway, the cops show up an hour later as we're all dozing off into a deep slumber and banged on the door like they were trying to break it. They, of course, don't believe us that it was the guys next door and we were trying to sleep. They say that they can see our beers through the window and can come in and arrest us if we want it to be difficult, and basically forced us to lie about throwing a party and apologize before letting us go back to sleep. The guys next door gave us their leftover McNuggets to apologize the following morning, but I'm still freaking ticked about it. Our next story is, a junior high school teacher kicked me out of her class for having cramps, so I never went back to her class. I apologize if this doesn't fit this sub. I had a hard time deciding where to put it. Ever since I hit puberty, I've had incredibly painful menstrual cramps. It wasn't unusual for me to be completely incapacitated for several hours at least once during each cycle. It was rare for them to hit me during school, but when they did, my teachers usually understood. Usually. My last year in junior high, I was assigned to a teacher, Mrs. R, who was easily the #1 favorite of every kid in the school. I'd heard a lot about her in previous years, so I was really hopeful when I started her class. Well, it was pretty easy to figure out why she was so popular. She gave out chocolate, constantly, and described herself as a chocoholic. I don't know if it was because I was overweight or because it was obvious I wasn't giving in to the bribe, but she took an immediate dislike to me. The feeling became mutual very quickly. I managed to get through most of the year with her with average grades, figuring I'd just tough everything out until I graduated. But one day, the cramps hit me just before lunch. I spent the entire lunch period laying in the nurse's office with little to no relief, since anything the nurse had wasn't strong enough to handle the kind of cramps I'd get. Mrs. R's class was after lunch, and only a couple doors down the hall from the nurse, so I managed to limp my way down into her classroom since I didn't want to get in trouble for being absent. Yay, US school system. I figured I'd be able to just sit in the back of the class and hide, since we were watching videos for some dumb project she'd assigned us. Unfortunately, I picked the desk that she parked the projector next to. I was hoping if I was quiet she'd just leave me alone, but every time I so much as slouched, she snapped at me to sit up straight. I don't know how long this went on, but I immediately just asked quietly if I could lay down in the back of the class. She angrily snapped, "If you're in that much pain, just go to the nurse." I took the chance and got the heck out of there. I was told later by a friend who'd been in the room that after the door closed behind me, she muttered, "I pooped out 4 kids. Don't you talk to me about cramps." Needless to say, I was upset. As soon as I got home, I told my dad what happened, and he was livid. I'm going to have him write out the next part, as he has a better memory for what happened than I do. Dad here. A little background. I was the stay-home parent in the family. Dealing with stuff like this was part of the job, and I didn't mind because when it comes to my kids, I have a protective streak a light year long. I contacted the school and complained. I said I wanted an appointment with their supervisor, the vice principal, the following day. Not an hour later, this guy calls me with the teacher in his office, and he wants to discuss it now over the phone. I said, I don't know who you're used to dealing with, but you're not going to blindside me 2-on-1 like this out of nowhere. No, we will not discuss it now. You can make the appointment I asked for. He said, I understand that your daughter was in pain. I said, I told you we're not discussing it right now. If you're not willing to make an appointment and insist on trying to sandbag me like this, we have nothing more to discuss. Tell the teacher my daughter will not attend her class again. He tried to talk about grades, and I said, I dare her to punish my daughter for this. Please do. See what happens. She skipped that class for the rest of the term and never got in trouble for it. When I saw her grade, I was ready to rumble again, but she said no. So I deferred to her wishes. She can explain why. In summary, my philosophy is, only be as big a jerk as the occasion requires, but don't be afraid to be as big a jerk as the occasion requires. And back to me. Thanks to my papa bear of a dad, I spent the rest of that year sitting in the hallway outside my favorite class of the day. I would read, sketch, and just in general relax for an hour until the bell rang. At the end of the year, I had to laugh when I got my report card. F for non-attendance in Mrs. R's class. It was the only F I've ever gotten on a report card, and I'm proud of it. To answer any questions, no, I haven't been diagnosed with anything like PCOS or endometriosis. We found a birth control that kept the pain manageable, and only recently started looking into a diagnosis again. We suspect PCOS, but need to do more tests. Either way, I'm hoping we'll have an answer soon. Yeah, crap teacher, any teacher that is insecure enough to take out frustrations on a child for something completely unrelated to academics is just not cut out for the job, in my opinion. So, not much of a revenge story. It's not like the teacher or the administration faced any kind of justice for this, but as long as OP is happy, I suppose that's all that matters, right? Coder Joe 1 commented, she wasn't a good teacher, and her only weapon that made her popular was bribing kids with chocolate. No wonder she hated anyone that resisted. Fauna Joy replied, yeah, from what I saw, when she wasn't targeting me for not falling for her bribes, she was a mediocre teacher at best. Our next story is, wife was told she should enter nursing school instead of engineering. Nah. I met my wife in high school. This was in the late 1980s, graduated college in 1992. Although we never really hit it off, at the time, we were in the same groups. After high school, she was voluntold by her boomer parents to marry a boyfriend and move out of the house. It was not me. She was working as a nurse's assistant, and her boyfriend, now husband, was going to the College of Engineering. She wanted to go to school, but was not sure about the direction. Being smart, she wanted to challenge herself, so she started looking at law school. She went to college during the day and worked at night to help support the husband who just went to school. They finally had some free time and were invited to join his parents for a dinner. During the dinner, the father-in-law started to ramble about how hard the engineering school was. He was a professional engineer, and that law school might be as tough. He insisted that she look into going to nursing school, since you already work like a nurse. The son, her husband, agreed and said it might be easier for her. She took that as a challenge and immediately enrolled into the chemical engineering department, the only female among 120 students in the program. It was tough. She was harassed and had to always take the higher ground in defending her work. 4 years later, she graduated with honors in a Chem Eng degree. Her husband had taken some time off from the program, got caught up in an affair, and she dumped his sorry butt. Many years later, she went to court as a SME, subject matter expert, for a landfill management company, testifying as an SME against her former father-in-law, who was an SME as the landfill designer/PE stamp that designed the landfill. I'm not 100% sure of details, except she testified in court against her former father-in-law's designs, and they spoke afterwards. She had not spoken to that family since the divorce. In casual conversation, outside the courtroom, her former father-in-law was grateful she did not attack him personally, but she did support the design flaws, and he acknowledged the flaws. In conversation, her ex-husband came up in his new career. He had dropped out of engineering school, married the girl from the affair, and was working as a nurse in an old folks' home. No shame, highly valued position. The former father-in-law understood the irony but could not understand how a woman could beat out 120 men to be dean's list in an engineering program. Hope this brightens your day. So the time period, thankfully, OP clarified when this took place. I mean, it pretty much explains why there's so much gender stereotyping and either intentional or unintentional misogyny taking place in here. So it's certainly a silly question to ask now in 2025, but that's just how boomers saw the world. Still see it, to be honest with you. Rich Canary 1279 commented, I went to nursing school after a fork-in-the-road moment. Medical career, and work with mostly women, who often annoy the freak out of me, or engineering, working mostly with men, who also often annoy the freak out of me. Thinking about what a jerk walking stereotype of an engineer my dad is, and how I'd probably feel triggered every working day dealing with them, I decided I'd rather endure hearing about weddings and baby showers all day than that. My dad let me know at my graduation I'd taken the easier path, but he was still proud of me. I'd sometimes wished I'd been the change instead of going where I'd feel more comfortable, but that kind of sealed it for me. No regrets. I have so much respect for women like OP's wife who chose to deal with that. Our next story is, Grandkids? I know a source. So I'm from a deeply chauvinistic, conservative Italian family. Like, women cook and clean, while the men watch TV and get served. One of my cousins brought a boyfriend around, and when he tried to help in the kitchen, he was told, oh no, you just go over there with the rest of the guys. Pete's goal is to have a big Italian wedding to a nice boy/girl from a good family, then have more Italian babies. My siblings and I, for various reasons, have not gotten married nor had kids, and we're in our 20s to 30s. Most of our cousins are married, or at least in serious relationships. We get the talk all the time about when we're going to settle down. Have we found a nice partner? When are we going to get grandkids? I'm tired of telling my family that I'm not going to get married because A, I'm not interested in marriage or even dating. Tried it, didn't like it. I prefer friendship without boning, thanks. And B, I don't think I'd be a good parent, and C, even if I got over A and B, I can't afford a child. So rather than getting into arguments about giving my parents grandchildren, I've decided if they don't want to take my answer seriously, I just won't give them a serious conversation. Parents say, when are you going to settle down? We'd love to have a little one around. You'd be such a great mother. And I reply, look, here's the thing. A husband can't do, but a baby, give me a few months. I got a source. I know a guy. And I make sure to say this in my cheesiest fake Italian Jersey Dago accent, so they understand it's a joke. So far, it derails the conversation every time. Yeah, that's really all you can do, cordially at least in this situation, is to just make light of it, because if you clap back and argue, I think things would just escalate. But yeah, live your life. I mean, I get where the parents are coming from, but it's your life, your decisions. Please don't feel pressured into falling into that. And it sounds like you're not. Our next story is, mess with my dad and I'll turn off your lights. A friend of mine's father and some colleagues started a small but very successful white-collar business along the lines of design and contract work. He was the last of the original partners still at the firm. A bit over a year ago, he had a small stroke that required several weeks of recuperating, but he is completely recovered. Well, when he returned to work, he was essentially forced into retirement. It was quite nasty. His son is the handiest person I've ever met and has an affinity for gadgets. He'd custom built the office several very large built-in shelves with lighting. He recently admitted to me that he still has control of the lights through an app and has set them to go off and on at random intervals throughout the day, and will sometimes turn them off and on repeatedly. I can't imagine this will last forever before they figure out what the problem is, but it's such a funny, small way to get some payback. Mountain Chick 2213 responded, "We bought a house and a year later sold it. 2 weeks after they moved in, they sent us an email asking us to replace the carpet throughout the house because it smelled like dog pee. Our dogs were housebroken and never did that in the house. My realtor even agreed. We had forgotten that my hubby had the Nest thermostat for their house. He started changing their temps at night. It took them months to fix it." Our next story is, this girl got revenge on her bullies. My grandmother was one of them. I think about this story from time to time. My grandmother was 1950s mean girl, Regina George level. I can attest, she never grew out of it and was actually worse to family. But her and her friends were baffled by this girl all the way to their deathbeds. In high school, there was a girl with terrible acne. I guess it was so bad that she was an easy target. Well, they bullied her from freshman year to senior year. They had a school break, spring break, and on that Thursday or Friday had decided to tell this girl that if she washed her face in cow pee, her acne would go away. I think she lived on a farm and had cows. Real creative high schoolers. Well, come Monday, over a week later, this girl had perfectly clear skin. Apparently she had clear skin till graduation and suddenly had confidence. Enough confidence that no matter what they asked or how they harassed this girl, she never told them how she got clear skin. However, she got under their skin for 60 years. My grandmother sometimes would remember and would be ticked off for days. Petty revenge for a lifetime. All she had to do was move on with her life. Makes me giggle. I hope whoever that girl was, she had a fulfilling life. Now, this is awesome. Not sure if I myself would be willing to try this in practice, but if that is the real reason why her horrible acne went away, my goodness, that is an absolute revelation. Cow piss, baby. Who'd have thought? Liv Julia commented, "That actually sorta makes sense. The urea in urine is very often used as an ingredient in eye treatments. A friend of mine told me about his mother, a Holocaust survivor. I don't remember the camp, but when the Allies were coming, the Nazis forced the prisoners to march through the snow. His mother, or his aunt, had a terrible eye infection and was worried that they were going to be shot for lagging behind. His grandmother told the girl, pee in the snow and then wash your eyes with it. She did that and got enough out of her eyes that she could see to walk, therefore surviving the Holocaust. I can see how pee in your eyes would work." Alright everybody, that is all the time that we have for today. If you enjoyed today's video, don't forget to like and comment down below. And if you want to check out any of our other videos, click this video on the right. With that all being said, I will see you all next time.